Below that, The Last Tycoon by F. Scott Fitzgerald, never finished it. Ulysses by James Joyce. Had a long period when I was young when I wanted to be James Joyce. Dead Until Dark, the True Blood HBO TV series is based on Charlaine Harris's Sookie Stackhouse novels, and Dead Until Dark is one of them. Not very good. Never finished it. Below that, Rowling's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I loved reading those as my nieces and nephews were growing up. They were really into that and into the movies, and it was just, it was great. Then below that, there's Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecies of the Future. One of many stupid books about Nostradamus. Almost all of them are stupid. Plutarch's Lives. Jack Kerouac's The Subterraneans. The Time Traveler's Wife. More of Lubitsch. Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Lawrence Durrell's Justine. And The Far Seer, a series by Robin Hobb, the best she ever did. Below that, I don't know if you can see it or not, Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf. Below that, a how-to book on my audio system. Below that, Kierkegaard's Kierkegaard analogy. Kierkegaard was a Christian philosopher in the 19th century, contemporary with Friedrich Nietzsche. They actually pioneered psychology, is what they were really doing. Speaking of Nietzsche, here's the one book of his I still have laying around. I've read so much Nietzsche, I couldn't begin to tell you all of it. But this is a nice little collection here. I've had it for ages. Nietzsche has a terrible reputation as being the guy, one of the philosophers for the Nazis. The Nazis felt in competition with the Marxists, and the Marxists had an intellectual mystique in those early days of, the 1920s and 30s, and so the Nazis co-opted all kinds of intellectuals and Aryan culture, and Nietzsche posthumously was, hijacked by the Nazis by way of his fascist sister, who never understood a word he wrote, and her extremely anti-Semitic and nationalistic husband. And they were morons, first and last, because the very definition of fascist is moron. And people lose sight of that. You demonize fascism so much, you tend to think of it as all Darth Vader and, some kind of evil genius behind fascism. And it's not. It's the brute stupidity of the mob in desperate straits and desperate to blame those unlike themselves for all their problems. God is dead. The workings of the universe no longer require a belief that God is making the sun come up over the horizon or for the seasons to come and go, that we have another more rational explanation for how all that comes about. It works for us because it has a certain predictive advantage to it, and so we go with that now. As far as explaining God as the creator, the only room this kind of rational understanding of the universe can allow for is a far distant prime mover in the beginning that might have set it all in motion. And that's a far cry from the personal God, interventionist God of the Bible. So, no, as far as I'm concerned, the only God is all that is. Okay? All that is God, and the only God. But God is an inadequate term for all that is. It is even a kind of childish term. And I'm glad and happy and anxious to retire that term, because it's very, very misleading. The blasphemous and shocking secret to Kabbalah is that it's fundamentally about overcoming the Father God projection and communing with all that is. And coming out with that and stating it openly may lack, discretion and what was considered cool, all this time. But talking around it for the last 2,000 years it's just gotten old. And a enlightened Wiccan will cushion the transition, to get past the projection of goddess and gods and all of this, this anthropomorphism, this need to humanize that which is beyond human comprehension. You get beyond that for those projections by way of the soul force of the earth herself and all of life consciousness thriving in, on, and through the planet. But there are other more radical means as well. In any case, Nietzsche was about overcoming yourself, not blaming your neighbor for all the problems and putting your neighbor in a concentration camp. Okay, that's the last thing he meant by anything he was saying. Now, toward the end of his life, he had a breakdown. I think syphilis of the brain contributed to the problems that he was having. There were a lot of ravings, a lot of scrawl, and his sister took all of this miasma and these rants and put it together under a compendium called The Will to Power. There's still a lot of lucid things going on in there, but the way she wanted to put it together was, it's a kindness to Nietzsche to just ignore that book. I am fundamentally a pragmatist. That's my mental framework for any question of knowledge or morality or psychology or whatever. Okay, it's about results. This particular book takes it from Charles Peirce on through William James and Dewey to Rorty. Pragmatism is a uniquely American philosophy. It reflects the American ethos at its most competent. It's most sensible. Americans can be sensible. It's just their imaginations are so beaten down by the media, movies, and TV, and everything else that that's all assumed its own reality for them. So, and they've always been perfect idiots when it's about sweeping absolute belief systems, religious or political. They get really very, very, very foolish because it's just counter to their natures. The national ethos is just, if it works, don't fix it. And if it works, that's the truth. It's just how it is. You take that principle and apply it to epistemology and knowledge, and no matter what the pretension might be from other schools of thought, if what a proposition is valid, it's because it is in some way able to be validated empirically, and empiricism is implicitly pragmatic. So round and round you go. It's inescapable. Who really isn't a pragmatist when they're trying to establish that something is true? You may seek out the ultimate cause of things. You'll never get there because you're not going to be able to humanly get to the ultimate cause of things in any logical, linear way. It's impossible. You can only get to the ultimate effect of things, and that ultimate effect is it's demonstrable. It constitutes a demonstrable body of evidence. So empiricism, pragmatism, they're not the identical terms, but they overlap considerably, and that's where I'm at with the whole thing.
The validity of cause and effect is about statistics. It's so statistically likely that one effect is brought about by a certain cause, and you can repeat it and demonstrate it over and over again. And so its plausibility, and the reason we accept it as a fact, is because statistically you can keep demonstrating that this, because of this, on and on and on. So taking that principle of statistics, you can venture out into things that are less quantifiable, like the paranormal, like ESP or telepathy, and in some cases you can establish that a person's aptitude for certain talents is, it belies coincidence. The odds are against coincidence. And so while you can't say anything final about a phenomenon that you can't repeat consistently every single time and get the same result every single time, you have a statistical probability that there is something there, okay? That is pragmatism. That's where pragmatism can venture a little bit beyond the borders of empiricism and still be making sense, okay? And that's where I'm at with it. I don't need these absolutist systems of metaphysics that get so top-heavy. I'm talking about problem solving, and I'm talking about statistical probability. Okay, how computers work. This is the hardware angle. You get enough of the theory, and then you set about to build a computer. And I only did this to overcome my fear and intimidation of technology, to just get hands-on and build a really primitive computer that, it worked, but, I never use it. And it was just the satisfaction of being hands-on with the technology, because we feel so much at effect with it. It's just point and click, and you're really being treated like a little kid. It's made simple and easy for you, and you don't get inside it. You don't get inside the world you live in. Course in Miracles, yes and no to that, but I had a Course in Miracles phase. Seth material is much more my thing. I don't have any Seth books around, but I've read them all, by Jane Roberts. Here's the portable Jack Kerouac. That's actually the real Jack, man, hugging his cat. Living with Mom. But yeah, I read Kerouac. Let's see. I gotta point this out. My niece and nephew, encouraged by my prejudicial sister, How to Be a Genius. This is her way of saying what it was like to grow up with me. She was 7 years older than her, so give me a break. I always knew more than my sister, who was 7 years younger than I was. But she thought I really was a know-it-all. She's encouraged her children in that opinion. Okay, we all get along. Right? We're a very, in our own way, a very close-knit family in our own way.